I think if you know when you have a hit at the daily stage, I've never known that of any movie I've ever done. I think if you do, you're a savant, which I am not. But I certainly knew the first few times we screened it for an audience, we had something really special. And little Megan is very lovable, and my daughter is going to be Megan for Halloween this year. So that's the first time she's ever worn a Blumhouse costume. So clearly, the movie affected the culture.
Hi, David Crow with Den of Geek here, and I'm here with Jason Blum.
How are you? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm doing great, especially I feel like every time I talk to you, it's a chance to speak with horrors like Commander-in-Chief.
Oh, I love that. I love that title.
So what is the state of the union of horror right now?
I have to, as speaking as horror as Commander-in-Chief, the media landscape generally is quite bleak. But horror is a very bright spot in that rather bleak landscape. People seem to love going to horror movies in groups. As we know, the box office is down a little bit. It's down a little bit this year, and since COVID, it has really still has not totally recovered. But horror seems to really work in movie theaters. So I'm very glad to say that horror is alive and well.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a weekend where Terrifier 3 beat the entire gross of Terrifier 2 in 1 week.
Beat it, yeah. I mean, and also Terrifier 3, the performance of Terrifier 3 is extraordinary. And we have a weekend coming up with 2 horror movies at once. And normally, that's verboten. You can't have 2 horror movies both do over $20 million or whatever. And it looks like both of them are going to perform incredibly well, which just means now it is October, which is, a little, it's an unusual month, an unusually great month for horror. But it looks like there's a real appetite out there for horror. And it seems to be, at the moment, like what fans are really looking for is old-fashioned horror. They don't want deviations. They want like old-fashioned, tough, gritty, scary, gory horror. So we like that. We like that. As the commander of horror is happy about that. But don't deviate.
Well, it seems, I would say they want monsters again, whether it's old or new.
I mean, I should have said that myself. What they're really looking for is monsters.
Pivot to Drop. I'll admit that's one I knew very little about until really yesterday, and I watched the trailer.
Oh,
but
great.
I was already excited because you have Christopher Landon, and you have the director of Happy Death Day.
Totally.
Freaky.
Megan Fahey.
Yeah.
Who's terrific.
Why do you think he's so good at threading the needle between horror and comedy?
I think probably the most difficult genre to get right is horror comedy. Very hard to have people scared and laughing equally at the same time. Drop is definitely more of a genre movie than a comedy. There's certainly lighter moments in it. But Chris just has a fine touch into marrying the two. Surprisingly, the other person who really has that, who we work with a lot, who did Wolfman, is Lee Whannell. Now, you don't see a lot of it in Wolfman. Wolfman is pretty intense. There's not a lot of funny stuff in it. But like if you look at in the Insidious movies, Specs and Tucker, like Lee has a real sense of humor. Upgrade, there's a lot of funny stuff in that too. And I think there are certain filmmakers that, like Chris, that can bring levity to a horror movie, which makes the movie scarier because the audience kind of relaxes for a minute and starts to laugh. And when they're relaxed like that, they're easier to scare. You're more prone to You're not ready for the scare, so when the scare comes, it's more effective. And like you said, Chris is amazing at that.
One thing I liked about Chris's other movies was that it felt very retro, like an 80s slasher. And to me, this feels like it could be an update of Scream, even in a way, with its techno terrifying.
Yeah, it definitely shares. There's tonal stuff between Scream and Drop for sure. It's a very, very taut, super intense movie. Like when you see it, you will think of nothing else for 92 minutes. I promise you that.
And also, you're working with Platinum Dunes on that. And since we've been talking about Universal Horror, Platinum Dunes, Blumhouse, both had major impact in the 2000s and 2010s. And has it ever occurred to you that for kids who've grown up in the last 20 years, your movies are a little bit maybe like Universal or Val Lewton is.
I mean, I haven't thought of it in that context, but I'm very flattered for you to say it, and that's very exciting. And I hope to provide a few more years of life-altering scary movies.
Well, speaking of life-altering, also we have Megan 2.0 next year.
Yes, for sure.
And, did you know when you were watching the dailies for the first Megan that you had not only like a cult classic, but like something that was just going to go viral in the culture?
No, I had no idea. I think if you know when you have a hit at the daily stage, I've never known that of any movie I've ever done. I think if you do, you're a savant, which I am not. But I certainly knew the first few times we screened it for an audience, we had something really special. And little Megan is very lovable, and my daughter is going to be Megan for Halloween this year. So that's the first time she's ever worn a Blumhouse costume. So clearly, the movie affected the culture
in a great way. Well, this one's in post-production. Have you seen anything maybe of the same, you think could have the same impact as Megan's dancing or singing?
I hope so. I would never presume to say we're going to do it again. It's very hard, and we're trying to do something quite different with the second movie, because if you repeat the movie too much, people are disappointed with the sequel. A sequel's got to be, as you know, sequel's got to be different enough from the first movie that people don't feel cheated, but not too different from the first movie that people don't feel cheated. And that's the line we're trying to straddle with Megan too, and I think we do that.
Could you say at all a little bit of what it's about, as the first movie seemed to me to be a lot about the dangers or the challenges of parenting in the 21st century?
I would say it's similar to that. It extends on that theme. I don't think we're tackling new social issues in the movie, but we're getting deeper into who Megan is, what makes her tick, and how lethal she can actually be.
You were touching on this a second ago, but what are the pitfalls you're thinking about when you're tackling, both Megan 2 or Black Phone 2, which is you can get an audience to show up for a sequel, but how do you make sure it's a movie that not only is what they want, but maybe surprises them with what they didn't know they wanted?
Look, I think, and we haven't always done this, by the way, but I think the most important factor to creating a successful sequel is to have the people who were responsible for the original movie back. Hollywood doesn't do that a lot, but we, on almost all the sequels we've done, not all, but almost all the sequels we've done, we have the original people back, because there's a tone and a magic dust in a movie that connects with the culture, and a movie that hits, like Megan or Happy Death Day or Paranormal Activity or Insidious. All these movies, the first movie had a magic sauce, and it's very hard, I shouldn't say impossible, it's very hard not to recreate that magic sauce without the original people involved. And then secondly, I think everyone that we work with really Scott Derrickson doesn't come back to do a sequel, or Gerard doesn't come back to do a sequel unless there's a real reason for it to be told, besides we're trying to take everybody's money again. And the same thing with Scott on Five Nights at Freddy's. And all three of those, just to use the sequels that we have coming out next year, all three of those creators saw a organic way that their story could continue to be told. Particularly Scott, he would never have come back unless he felt like there was a reason to do it.
Well, Scott and C. Robert Cargill, I feel like they are real auteurs in the genre today. So what brought them back, or what?
The only thing that brings Scott and Cargill back is storytelling. That's it. There's no money in the world that can bring them back. They have to feel that there's a continuation of the story of the first movie that they're passionate about. And luckily, on Black Phone, there was. But if there wasn't, we never would have gotten them back.
Well, the first Black Phone is so genuinely sinister, insidious, but you could call it all of those things. And it really was terrifying because it combined real-world horror with the supernatural. Is it fair to say this sequel will be maybe a little more supernatural, given that the grabber is dead?
I don't know if I would say that. I would say on the supernatural scale, I think it's kind of similar. It definitely explores new themes. But I think in terms of supernatural, it's kind of similar to the first movie.
Well, maybe another way. What could you say about the grabber and Ethan's role in the second one?
I can't say much except I'll say Ethan is back in the movie again.
Well, that's always good news. And the other sequel we were mentioning, Five Nights at Freddy's. What can you say about Five Nights at Freddy's 2?
I could talk a long time about Five Nights at Freddy's 2. We worked very, very hard on the script for this movie, and we didn't have as many drafts of the script for Five Nights at Freddy 2 as we did for one. One, we had about 14 different versions. This, we had about 4 or 5 different versions. I've said this before. Scott is one of the smartest, if not the smartest, person I've ever worked with. The way he picked up movie making, having never made a movie on the first movie, was extraordinary to me. He was 2 steps ahead of every question when I asked him. So what was different about this movie, and to answer your question, one thing that I can tell you about the movie is that it was interesting to work with Scott, I was no longer working with someone who had never made a movie before. So that presented like a very different partner for me, and more fun in a way, because the more familiar the person I'm working with is about movies, the more fun it is, the more healthy the conversations are. So that was very different with this movie. And I think he got more confident about that. And I think we take more risks with the movie. And I loved the script, and Scott loved the script. I'm very happy with where we are now. We're about to start shooting the movie, and I think fans are going to be very happy with it.
Well, talking about Five Nights just quickly here is, I had no idea what Five Nights at Freddy's was until I saw the trailer for the first movie, and obviously it was hitting with an entire different generation. And I'm curious. Blumhouse is now also starting to make video games. Do you think the nature of where young people are finding horror is changing?
I do think it's changing. I think people are finding continue to find horror in movies and on television. I think people are finding horror in short form. People are finding horror on YouTube, and obviously horror games have been popular for a long, long time. And I think we as a company are trying to I don't want to expand the company by doing like other different kinds of movies or other different kinds of TV shows. I want to expand the movie by scaring people in different ways. And so I want to scare people in games, in live events, and in movies, and in TV shows, and in any way I possibly can.
And if they're finding horror in other media, where does that affect or change where horror cinema is in that landscape? I
don't think so, in that horror cinema, like I said at the top of the interview, hasn't really been challenged the way other genres have in movies. But I think it feeds off one another. And I think what I'm hoping is, if you like Blumhouse movies, you'll like Blumhouse games. People feel, I hope, a DNA in our movies that I hope they're going to feel in our games, in our TV shows, in everything that we do.
Jason, I could talk a lot longer to you about horror, but it sounds like the State of the Union is strong right now.
All right. Yeah, the State of the Union is strong. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.